Welcome to the Up Arrow Podcast with William Harris, featuring top business leaders sharing strategies and resources to get to the next level. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey everyone, I'm William Harris. I'm the founder and CEO of Element and the host of the Up Arrow Podcast, where I feature the best minds in e-commerce to help you scale from 10 million to 100 million and beyond as you up arrow your business and your personal life. Excited about the guest that I have today, Tyson Drake. Fractional CMO for 8 to 9 figure D2C brands. He was previously the CMO of the Udi. Brilliantly smart. We're going to get into a lot of good stuff. Main thing we're talking about today is internationalization, growing from roughly 130 million in one market to 200 million in 8 markets. We're talking with Tyson Drake. Drakey. Okay, so we were talking about nicknames before. What's the most embarrassing nickname?
Embarrassing nickname. What is this? What is this show? G-rated? PG-rated?
Yeah, let's keep it fairly clean. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my close friends call me Drakey, or D-rake. Like the shape of D-rake, shape of D-rake. But yeah, I have a lot of nicknames. Anyone who really knows me, I've got a really close group of core friends have known me for like 30 years, and they put like a D and then add like a word to it. So it could be, how is that, after this podcast that they might go, how was the D pod or something like that. A bit of an inside joke,
I love it. I think we were talking about this because even, you asked me, well, what do you go by, Will or William? And they sound the same to me. My mom's side all called me Will. My dad's side called me William. Sounds the same. Well, I caddied at some Glenmore Country Club there, and there I was Bill. Everybody just called me Bill, whether I wanted it or not. And it was fine.
Why Bill?
There's a client. Well, I think that's just like a golf name. This is the only thing I could think of. It was like the golf pro's name was Bill, and it's like when I was there, they're just like, "Hey, Bill." Like, okay, I guess I'm running with Bill. I'm Bill now. There's a client in Pasadena that called me Willie. And there are only people who called me Willie, but there was already a Will there. I was like, jokingly just said, call me Willie. And still to this day they do. And every once in a while someone will say like, hey, Willie. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. I got to respond to that.
Yeah, actually, now you mention it, in my earlier days when I was working on the phones for a little bit, working in sales, right? As you wear multiple hats in this industry sometimes. So in the early days, I was on the phones doing sales for a little bit. And in the early days, I mean like 2009.
Sure.
And sometimes people would get my name wrong. So hello, welcome to X brand, Tyson speaking, and people go like, oh, like Carson. I'm like, yeah, Carson, and I just like roll with it. Or sometimes one time I got called Python, like Python. I'm like, yeah, Python. Yep, my name's Python. And
just roll with it.
Yeah, just roll with it. Let's get through the name and let's just move through to how I can help you. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. I'm the same way. I just roll with it. I'm like, call me Willie, Willis, Willard. There's plenty of nicknames for me. I don't really care too much. Sounds like you're similar. I took us way off topic for the beginning. We do have some really fun, interesting stuff to get into. Before we start into the meat of the discussion, I do want to make our announcement of our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Element. Element is an award-winning advertising agency optimizing e-commerce campaigns around profit. In fact, we've helped 13 of our customers get acquired, with the largest one selling for nearly 800 million and one that IPO'd recently. You can learn more on our website at element.com, which is spelled ELUMYNT.com. That said, on to the good stuff here with Tyson. So as a fractional CMO, what are the 3 ways that you like to bucket things?
Yeah, so as a fractional CMO, let's just explore that topic just quickly. So as a fractional CMO, I perform the same functions as an in-house CMO, but across several brands at a time. Usually that's up to 3. And so how I like to bucket the functions are 3 things that I work on. And that is where I believe my core competencies are. And so if that's bucket 1, that's like measurements and analytics. So that would be attribution, medium mix modeling, incrementality testing. That might be some custom analysis. There's like that might be like custom dashboards and analysis. That could be something I like to do is like merchandising analysis, for example. So that's like the measurement bucket. And then the second bucket is what I like to call professionalizing the marketing org. And that's just a fancy word for like a team and leadership, basically. So everything from hiring, recruitment, like how does the marketing team operate? What is like the cadence of like an in-house team? And what I'm referring to is like in-house teams, right? Sometimes it's a mix of, usually it's a mix of in-house and external. And so like professionalizing the marketing org, how do they operate? What is the meeting cadence? How are those meetings run? And like what are the frameworks associated with like a good cadence? Basically, how does a team work together? So I call that professionalizing the marketing org, and that's different, different stages. And then the third part is like growth strategy, just broader growth strategy, where that is like internationalization, new products, new channels, new markets. That could be like growth strategy in terms of how do we think about our 3 levers of growth: acquisition, retention, monetization. So they're like the 3 key buckets that I kind of come in. Sometimes I'm only working on one bucket, that's fine. Sometimes I'm working across all 3. It really depends on whatever the brand and the founder needs at that given time.
I love it. So when we talk about measurement, that's actually something that I'm a big fan of as well. And I've written a lot about measurement on a very nerdy level, talking about Simpson's paradox and Bayes' theorem and how that's applied within advertising frameworks. I just got back last week. I was in LA, Dodger Stadium, speaking there with the Bill and Visa team about optimizing ads for profit, which is different. And there's different ways that you're going about it. So I have my frameworks, but I'd like to hear from you. When you think of, let's just say, overall e-commerce growth framework from a measurement standpoint, a data standpoint, what are you looking at as your core metric? And people will talk about MER, ROAS, contribution margin. Like, what is your, and it doesn't have to be one, like, but what's your key metrics that you really like to look at?
Yeah, so I have like a custom dashboard that I like to build, and I've written a thread about this as well. I've done some podcasts about the dashboard, but for me, it all comes down to contribution dollars, right? It comes down, like, for me, that is the core metric, is contribution dollars, which is different from margin. So margin I think of as percentage, and dollars is dollars, or whatever the unit of account and currency might be. So for me, that's dollars.
Sure.
That's dollars. For some people, it might be euros or whatever. And so that is my core, and then it becomes, okay, well, are we first order profitable? I always push for being first order profitable, and to be fair, I'm usually not coming in to a business that is not doing well. So I'm usually not like a guy that is called up for a failing business, and I'm trying to turn it around. So I'm not like the turnaround guy. I've been in turnaround situations, but usually a brand comes to me and they're like, listen, we've been scaling really hard. This is like a 2 or 3 year old brand, and we're just a bit of a rocket ship right now, and we just need someone to come in and like take this stuff away from us, and like so me, the founder, can like go and do other things, and they're just kind of like, here, like just like take it and go, and then implement some of these frameworks, and usually those frameworks are more associated with measurements and analytics, marketing org professionalization are usually the 2 core competencies, and so a lot of the brands I come into, the typical situation might be, maybe they're just using a Google sheet and they're just entering in daily contribution dollars on the spreadsheet, right? Or maybe they're getting a report from their, like, whoever's in finance, whoever's like running the finance function. That can be, sometimes it's a fractional CFO, sometimes it's like bookkeeper, and they're just running with a spreadsheet. Other times, a little bit more sophisticated, they might have like a Lifetimely or something, or Iris in place or whatever. But usually it's a rocket ship, and they're just like, we need someone to just like help us run with this thing, and like help the team like kind of figure out some internal stuff or whatever. But yeah, contribution dollars is the North Star metric, and that's how I think, and that's how it like kind of works.
I like it because that reminds me a lot of the start of the talk that I got into last week, and something that I think I'm passionate about is pulling back I contribution margin, MER, they're good metrics, and we use them, and they have their place. But it neglects the actual dollar number. Exactly to your point. And we've run into this a number of times where somebody will increase their MER before coming to us. They're like, great, we told our team, increase the MER, increase the contribution margin. They're proving things. Their numbers are looking better. And then you look at their profit, though, and their profit is tanking. And that's because it seems counterintuitive that you can improve your efficiency, improve your MER, but if you've done it by scaling back on ad spend or something like that, the actual aggregate EBIT number that you're getting from that is worse. And so looking at that actual contribution dollar or the actual dollar unit amount that you're looking at is still the key beyond all of the different percentages and numbers and ratios.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you can have like a flat contribution margin, but you can have like a worse contribution margin, and you can have like an increased contribution dollar, because the reality is that if you can do that while scaling customer acquisition costs as well, because as long as you have an increasing AOV. And the AOV, I'll give you an example. So brand A, for example, brand A has like an AOV of $50, and they have a gross margin percentage of like 80%. And so therefore they have a gross margin, so dollars of like $40. So 80% of 50 is $40. And let's say they're paying $30 to acquire a customer. So they have a contribution margin, so percentage of 20%. And their contribution dollars is $10, okay? And then now take another brand. So let's go the other extreme. That has a contribution, so an AOV of like $200. They have a gross margin of 55%, which is far less than 80%. They have contribution dollars of 55% of 200 is $110. They can be paying $60 to acquire a customer, which is double the CAC of brand A, for example, of 30. And their contribution margin can be 25%, which is, contribution dollar terms is $50. So you can have like, you can have a, you can increase your CAC from like 30 to like 60, as long as your AOV is increasing and you have decent gross margin. You don't want to be ridiculous and have like a 5%, 10% gross margin. You still want to maintain good gross margin, but like, contribution margin between 20% and like 25%. What's that, like 25% or whatever? 25% between 20 and 25. If my math is correct. And
sounds about right.
Yeah.
Late for me, early for you. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, so you can have like, you can have, similar as well. You can have a very similar contribution margin at 25%. If you, even with high AOV, if you just scale CAC, right? And so that's a good example why, contribution dollars is better to look at than contribution margin in my view.
I'm with you completely on that. So let's get into the science of how you're approaching, let's say maybe especially that second point of professionaling the marketing team or the organization. Well, before I go there, actually, I want to go to Udi. I want to talk about what you did at the Udi with going from one market to 8 markets. Because we're talking about internationalization. What was it that allowed you to scale them in a relatively short amount of time from roughly 130 million to 200 million? What were these different markets? How did you look at them? What was the thought there? Yeah,
so context for those playing at home. So I came into the Udi like maybe June or July 2021. And the Udi had already experienced like a fairly, Udi's at this stage is probably on its third year, second and a half or third year. And so it had already experienced like a rapid rate of growth in its own right. But like all brands, you hit different phases of growth, and there are different challenges with all those different phases. And so the Udi was a part of a much larger group called the Davy Group. And the Udi, while the Udi was the most well-known and successful of the group probably had maybe I don't know, 10, somewhere between 5 and 10 brands at the time. And so I came in, and I was working across all probably 5 brands at when I first came in, including the Oodie as one of them. So maybe my time was split like 40, 50% Oodie and maybe 10, 15% across some other brands at the time. And that wasn't just me. That was a lot of people who were working within the Davy Group. And the challenge with that is that Oodie just wasn't getting the attention that it needed. And so it had some restructuring in the business, and I was like head of performance marketing, I think, going into that. And then I was promoted to CMO of the Oodie, and then I was full-time on Oodie. And then but throughout that period, so the Oodie we had 5 warehouses in different continents. So like maybe Australia, maybe New Zealand, US, Canada, maybe not New Zealand, maybe it's UK, and then one in Europe. So I think probably 5, maybe 6. And so they had all this like inventory sitting there ready. And most of the Oodie sales, a majority of Oodie sales, I mean, it is like, a massive wearable hoodie, a wearable blanket.
Yep.
And so you have like really, 4 months of the year to make maybe like 80% of your sales or 70% of your sales or whatever. And so you're basically a jacket brand. You don't sell many jackets in summer. You sell jackets in summer. In this case, hoodies in summer, and we did, but you just sell a lot more in winter. You sell a lot
100%.
more. And so we always were playing this balancing game of like, all right, it's Southern Hem, so that for us that'd be Australia, New Zealand. It's Southern Hem winter, so we need to basically push as much budget as possible and scale as fast as we can, because we have like 4 months to really capitalize on this. Push as hard as we can to like Australian or Southern Hem winter, we called it. And then, Southern Hem kind of goes up, and then, it starts to like decline. And then as it declines, you hope that like you can transition fast enough into Northern Hem winter and do the exact same thing all over again, where you'd shift a lot of budget towards Northern Hem winter, and the creatives, merchandising, everything involved with that, and then you push that as like hard as you can. And so when I came in, it was like and so we didn't have any frameworks for this, right? We didn't have any frameworks to like, well, how do we think about budget allocation across hemispheres? How do we think about like where do we prioritize our activities, not just budget but marketing activities across hemispheres? And is there a framework to do that? So I came in and started to implement a lot of different frameworks, and one of those frameworks were like measurement, like we talked about before. And it was like just bringing some transparency and some dashboards into like what's going on in all his business, because we had our websites launch, and we had 8 different like Shopify instances launch in regions like Australia. New Zealand was aggregated with Australia. Then we ended up rolling out New Zealand to its own. We had UK, we had EU, which is basically all of Europe minus Germany and France, I think. And UK, if you want to include them with Europe. And then we had US and Canada. I think that's all of them. And we had our warehouses with all this product at the time, but they were just sitting there, right? They weren't really doing anything. In the Northern Hem, anyway, they were just kind of sitting there. And yeah, we were like, sales were kind of trickling through, but so one of the things is like bring dashboard and measurement transparency to what's going on, and then be like, oh look, we're like, we haven't, and then we have like these inventory reports coming in about where stock is sitting and where, and aligning merchandising team or ops team with marketing, and then just starting to have like these cases, okay, what do we need to do to move this inventory, and then so he's just bringing in a lot of these frameworks, and so part of the framework was what I like to call this like progressive internationalization, where, first of all, you need to absolutely have some kind of dashboards and transparency as to what's going on in the business. That's inventory, that's like how much we're spending in these regions, if anything, how much inventory is moving, how much inventory do we have in these regions. And so it's like, just bring some level of transparency to what is going on in different regions. And then from there, you can start to be like, okay, so what do we need to do to kind of move this inventory? How are we merchandised? Why are we not featuring our best sellers on the homepage? We need to feature our best sellers on the homepage. What is our budget allocation per region? How do we think about that? And how do we put the foot down? So Udi, the good thing about Udi, it was like at the time maybe like $70 for an Udi, $70 for an Udi, and people would buy multiple Udis. It was a pretty big gifting product.
Sure.
And so we had a decent sized AOV where like on every single purchase would be first purchase profitable. And so that's a really great position to be in, because then it becomes, okay, so how much budget can we allocate budget effectively across channels? And then how can we have good creative? And we had all our majority of our creative we had in house. And so then it just became a game of like, okay, so how could we how fast can we scale, and how much can we put the foot down, and strategically allocate budget between campaigns and platforms, and have like the right measurement infrastructure to be able to see that. Two, have like inventory transparency to be able to see when inventory items are going in and out of stock, what best sellers are, make sure we're making creatives of the best sellers. I'd argue that's merchandising, not just creative strategy. And three, just aligning the team on like what the different countries are and what their inventory position is, so we can then make sure we have the right allocated budget associated with that at any given time. But then communicating closely with like the ops team, and have a tight feedback loop between ops and merchandising. That's like, hey, we have all this inventory in X region, and we have the the ability to mark some of it down because it's been there for a while, but we've got these other new product launches that we can launch in this region, but not in the southern hem, but we can in the northern hem. I give the example that like we had Disney rights for our merchandising in southern hem, so AU and Z, but we didn't, and UK, but we didn't have it in the US. So when we're we had to have a different merchandising strategy for US and Canada. So when we're communicating like, oh, these Disney patterns are now launching on social, we can't just say it's launched everywhere. We have to like exclusively AU, NZ, UK only. And so just setting expectations. But in terms of scaling, that's really how it worked for the Udi. And so I came in, implemented dashboards, and we got some transparency as to what's going on. And then it's just a matter of, all right, well, let's see if we can scale as fast as we can, and then just making sure the right people were working on the right things.
There's a lot that I want to unpack there. We're going to get to the team optimization in a little bit, but one of the things that I think that you touched on that I really appreciate is, there's the saying, what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. And I think to your point, there's no way to impact that many different markets if you don't have the right dashboards set in place where you're actually starting to see how things are flowing. And I think that's a very good point. But I think where you went that I really appreciated, that I thought was interesting, is how did you know that it was that was the right next thing to do? Because there's a significant amount of complexity that goes to this. You covered a lot of the complexity that's there. Average business, is there like a threshold dollar amount, 5 million, 10 million, where they get to, where you're like, okay, now you maybe know that this is the time for you to branch out into other markets instead of just expanding in the current market that you're in?
Yeah. So I would think through in terms of, to make it clear, the Udi was in a really good position when I came in. It was already a rocket ship. They were doing phenomenally well. And I just kind of helped pour like some fuel on the fire. So just to be clear, but for brands who haven't, didn't have the luxury of like warehouses already in different markets, and and lockdown at the time. Let's bring some context. We had there's lockdown across the world, and no one's like traveling to work every day, and people sitting at homes in their Udis and like working from home. So right conditions, but also right founder. Davey was very is a phenomenal marketer and a really understands like a lot of these concepts. It is extremely smart and works really hard as well. So right founder, right product, right market conditions as well. And so for founders that aren't don't necessarily have all those things lined up, that kind of trifecta, how do you evaluate when it's like good to go international, right? And so I would say that I would think of it in terms of in starting to think in terms of how big your TAM is in your local market. And so what is TAM? So TAM for me is total addressable market within your category. And so how I would define a category, if you're in skincare, it is like anyone, all women who like skincare product, which is probably everyone, right? Every woman likes some form of skincare. But then there is like, okay, so I'm sure there's like sub categories within that category. It might be like natural skincare or like luxury, or I don't know. I'm not too, I haven't worked in too many like different skincare brands, but you get the picture. Like there is like a skincare category. Yeah. So you're like, okay, what is the TAM of your skincare category within your market? And there's some tools that help evaluate that. One of them is Tracksuit, for example. And there are some tools that kind of know what that TAM is. And so TAM is made up of two different areas in my view. You have in-market audiences where those are people who are in the market to buy your product and service for the category. And that can be, think of a chart, right? You have like a chart on like the y-axis is like percentage, yeah? And then on the x-axis down the bottom, you have like time. And then so like in market is kind of like this thing that fluctuates over time. So at some point in times, there is a greater percentage of people who are in market, and that might be Q4. Or it really depends on seasonality. If you're a winter brand, your TAM, in market might go like this and then go like that for other times of the year. But the point is, TAM is like variable. In market is variable, and then within the in market, you essentially have brands who are fighting for this in market demand, right? And that is like what essentially the like Facebook is, or any ad platform that uses behavioral targeting. And behavioral targeting, I kind of frame and understand that as targeting, the ability to target people who want to buy and are in market to buy. And so therefore, Facebook and majority of these ad platforms who use behavioral targeting are targeting in market. And yes, doesn't mean they're necessarily in market only for your product. It means they are in market. Facebook, Meta, whatever, thinks they're in market for the category. So it's just to frame this context. And so you have in market audiences, and then you have this next percentage of the TAM, like the majority, which is potential category buyers, and these are just everyone who's in the category. And so what happens, and how I think about it is how brands usually scale is they start off with just targeting all of their in-market buyers, and they scale and they compete against other brands who are doing the same thing. And then eventually you kind of reach this like ceiling, or this sideways growth, growth, to make the term sound a bit nice. And you don't grow anymore. Yeah, so there's some ceiling. Right. It's not that imagine like in market demand is like here, for example, and it's like maybe 5 or 10% or whatever it might be of like the total addressable market. And so maybe you reach like here as a brand, and but there's all these other brands in the category that are still fighting. So you essentially have to take market share away from all the other brands who are fighting for in-market demand. And so that's when you kind of reach, the we are competing for market share within their in-market. And that's when you usually see this kind of sideways growth kind of play out. And there's a few ways to kind of like look at sideways growth, zooming out and looking year over year if you're not really growing or if you've declined and the market conditions aren't absolutely terrible. Like now is a bit of a hard gauge to kind of see if that, or like comparing the year after COVID, if you're like, peak lockdown product and then like the years after, there has to be some context within the category. Zoom out, have a look. Maybe you've seen some sideways growth for months or quarters and you're like, we can't grow. And so what is essentially happening is, you've probably tapped out of your in-market audiences, and you need to think about where the next phase of growth is coming from. And I know I talked about that for like a little bit of time, but it's really important because every brand will kind of reach this ceiling, and you should understand why, and then also understand what are the tools to be able to like get out of that. And there's 3 ways I like to think about it. It's like new markets, new channels, and new products, and that's how I really like to think about that. And we can touch on all of those if you want, but this is like going on to internationalization. So new markets, right? I don't know. Let's talk about new channels in the concept of this TAM. Okay. So you have like all potential category buyers. So you go in market, all potential category buyers. And let's say you're in US, and you're like, oh no, I think US is not a good example, because US has the luxury of being 125, 135 million population. You have a massive affluent middle class. In comparison to other countries, in comparison to New Zealand, that is not that they're not affluent or whatever, but they have a population of 5 million. Yeah, so it's like, what state in the US has a population of 5 million? I don't know. Maybe
exactly.
Maybe none. And so not even so you have in one extreme being New Zealand, another more extreme being like Estonia. My fiance, she's Estonian, and they have 1.3 million people. Yeah, so your in-market audience is going to exhaust very, very, very quickly if you are targeting, skincare buyers in Estonia. Maybe there's like, half the population of purchase age, like 18 to, whatever. So I don't know, maybe that's like, 400,000 people. That's your like in market. So how you think about new markets is in market TAM is relative, right? And so in New Zealand you exhaust it a lot quicker than you do in the US, and so you have to think, okay, so how do I get out of this in market demand, and what levers can I pull? So for that's new channels, and channels I think in 2 parts. Channels is like new distribution channels. In terms of distribution, so there's like wholesale, there's retail, that is maybe Amazon, so marketplaces if you're not there, and if you are maybe only an Amazon brand, that might be moving to direct to consumer and having a website. And so that's how I think about like new channels, but new channels can not only be distribution, it can also be like marketing channels. So that can be like maybe you are just using Meta and Facebook, Meta and Google ads, Google search ads. So maybe new channel for you might be YouTube. Okay. And so by adding YouTube, even though it is like probably classified as behavioral targeting, it's probably a bit more broader reach. And it's majority conversions are probably not going to be click-based conversions. They're probably going to be a combination of click and view, because like 50% of people watch YouTube on their TVs, where it's not really, it's just still harder to track. I mean, you can see click-based attribution, but a lot of purchases don't happen right away because they're on TV. Like the ad stock effect, which is like the percentage of people who buy over time after seeing an ad, concept used more so in like marketing mix modeling. It's just a lot longer to see the effect of the ad, whereas paid search ads like kind of happens right away. So the ad stock effect is like super quick. And so you can think about, okay, well, just New Zealand, for example. All right, so we're sideways growth for a long time, a few quarters, year over year, we're not growing, or we've really only grown a little bit. So let's take the concept of, all right, we're going to go more upper funnel, and how I define top of funnel is essentially targeting potential category buyers who are not in the market, not currently in the market, or targeting non-in-market audiences. And the bet is you target a wide enough group of people where you know that the majority of those people who you're targeting are not going to be in market. And the goal is to make your brand part of their consideration set, which is what mental availability is. Is just making, is mental availability just a fancy way for saying, we want to become part of our future customers' consideration set. So when they transition to becoming in market from being a potential customer, they're not currently in market, they transition to becoming in market for whatever reason, whether it be, they broke like their, I don't know, their pot or their pan, or they run out of some consumable, and makeup or whatever that may be. They're like something happens that's a trigger, and like, oh, I need like. Or is it like winter? It's like, oh, I need some new winter clothes. The trigger, yeah? They become in market, and they're like, I remember, and people usually have, there's lots of studies we've done this, and people usually have around 3 brands as part of their consideration set. You're not gonna, you don't have like 20 brands that you go through this list in your head and you like rule them out like a checklist. You're like, that's not really how people think. They have like 3 that their brands are kind of like most memorable, or they have like some kind of emotional connection with. And that should be the goal of like, this top of funnel advertising is create an emotional connection to your potential customers. So when they become in market through some kind of trigger, you are memorable to them. And maybe they go directly to your website, or in a retail context, they see you on the shelf in front of 20 other brands, and they're like, yep, I remember them. I've got some kind of connection and trust have been built with them, emotional connection or some kind of trust. I'll buy that product. And so that's the kind of the.
So what I love.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
What I love about this, right? And I let you go on that 10-minute rant because you were saying some good stuff. But like when you think about new channels, so we are on the advertising side, and I see a lot of brands who, exactly like you said, maybe they've grown 300%, year over year, and then 200% the next year, 100% the next year, and then it's like 25% the next year, and they're trying hard and they still want to continue to grow, and 25 is still great in that position, in that context, but they're starting to see that level off. And to your point, it's like they've maybe really reached their in-market segment. And so where we like to go from an advertising standpoint is saying, okay, this is at the point now where we need to go beyond just that in-market segment. Let's loop in CTV or something else. Like you said, let's go a little bit higher in that funnel. Let's start creating that demand instead of just satisfying the demand that's there. But I like how you're pairing that with also new channels being, wholesale or retail, because we forget a lot of times in the D2C space that, e-commerce sale only makes up about 15% of the total retail pie in the US. That's still a very, very small amount. And so you've reached that group, but there are a lot of other people that are exactly like those people that just aren't going to buy on your website, but they'd buy if you were there. And so if you just go to the retail and you forget about doing the CTV where you're expanding beyond the people that are in market, then they're not even going to think about you. They're going to go there, they're going to walk right past you, they don't know you. And so it's a combination of both of these that really helps to accelerate that growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think, people, we get, direct to consumer, you start off as direct to consumer, but, people should remember that it's just another channel. Direct to consumer is a channel. If you're a wholesale brand and you've exclusively only been a wholesale brand for your entire life cycle, you think of direct to consumer as a channel, and you kind of bolt that on. You build out some internal or external competencies, use an agency, or whatever it may be. You build out that competency, but it becomes a channel. And if you really want to build a large, lifelong brand, you should be multi-channel. You shouldn't just think of direct to consumer as the only way to distribute your product. It's just a distribution mechanism, right? It's totally. It's like, you don't just use Facebook, or just like Google search. You have a multi, channel approach to your marketing, and the same thing should be thought about distribution. So, but it's only one way, right? So like, and
right.
Going.
You said new channels.
Yeah. So going up,
but then there was also Go ahead.
Yeah. So going up the funnel, up the, I guess, channel marketing funnel is only one way. And whatever channel, the channel selection might be different for every brand. Maybe you start with YouTube, or maybe you could start with, connected TV or whatever that may, linear TV, whatever that may be right for you. And it's not right for everyone, and and the New Zealand case is a really good example in comparison for the US, where if your in-market audience are exhausted very quickly, you got, that's one way, but there are other ways. And so if you think about, new channels, and then new markets is the other one. And so you might go, okay, well, we are going to, rather than invest in top of funnel activities in New Zealand, which we know are going to be costly and we have to invest significant amounts, And you know what? We're not shrinking. We're not growing really fast, but we're still growing a little bit year over year. And we're happy with growing 10, 15, 20% year over year. We're happy with that in our main market, which is New Zealand, in this hypothetical. Let's launch in Australia because Australia is we're 26, almost 27 million people now, and culturally it's very, very similar to New Zealand. I'd say the relationship is really akin to US and Canada, and so you have and so you go, okay, we're going to internationalize to Australia, and that's one lever that you can pull, right? And so the decision is what is the way to do that, and how I like to think about doing that is through the concept of progressive internationalization, right? And so you can start this whole. You can basically start the entire process again, right? Where you start by targeting in market audiences through behavioral targeting channels, and then you go into this market, and you, there's a few ways to start this out and test it. So let's talk about the concept of progressive internationalizations in the context of this kind of framework. And so it usually starts off as like introducing a new country within a marketing campaign. So let's take Meta. You're only targeting New Zealand. Sometimes people might just add Australia into their campaign targeting, and so now the same campaign is targeting Australia, or the same campaigns are targeting New Zealand, and Australia just been added in there. Maybe they're a bit more savvy, and they have one campaign for New Zealand, and then one campaign for Australia. And so I would say that's the first step in my view, is segmenting out the campaign spend, because what it does is it gives you some form of customer acquisition costs, transparency or accountability. You can at least control budgets. Yeah.
Yes.
You can control spend. You can say, okay, well, we have a cost cap of X, or we have a budget of Y. Whatever your methodology might be, it just gives you control, right? And so you start spending some money, and you go, okay, wow, this is what we're paying to acquire customers. Not only in platform, but maybe you're just driving customers all to the same website. And you step phase 2 of this is like, okay, well, we want to use Shopify markets, and that would be to at least set up some form of local currency, local prices, etc. Like all the good things that people should know and should absolutely be doing with Shopify markets: local currency, local pricing, payments. Maybe you have some form of inventory control if you have like multi-warehouses, one in New Zealand, one in Australia, and then you should have like associated shipping rates as that. So just go into Shopify markets and like fill out the necessary information. That'd be like step 2 in this example. And there's plenty of free resources from Shopify to help do that. And so step 1, separate your campaigns, test, control budget. Step 2, fill out the Shopify markets information that Shopify provides you. And then step 3 would be, let's assume that things are going well. You're making some good sales and you're targeting your market audiences. You're scaling, and then you're starting to see like some decent growth again as a result of like bolting on this new market, right? You've just bolted on this new revenue stream, which is like doing the same thing in a different market. Great. And so the next phase there is kind of like, okay, well, we think we should provide ourselves a little bit more accountability. And so what that means is probably segmenting in some way how the P&L is split out through, either just reporting a new country within the existing P&L and they're or separating them out completely. And so we go, okay, we have P&L A for New Zealand and then P&L B, and then they run as 2 completely separate businesses, but they use the same resources in this regard. And maybe that's an internal team that is managing everything. And so maybe you just 50% the internal resources, but you have different cogs. You have like duties to pay for. You have different associated currencies that you have to think through as well. And so you'd be like, okay, maybe you have different 3PLs, one in New Zealand, one in Australia. And from there, I would encourage people to think through splitting out ad accounts where you have different currencies as well. And so here, you've gone from aggregating New Zealand, Australia into one campaign, maybe you've just rolled it out into its own campaign, but then you want to start planning ahead and think, all right, well, if we're gonna, it's a little bit less obvious with AU and NZ, the dollar, because they're pretty close. However, if you're using something like the pound or the USD with the NZD, there's a pretty significant difference, and it just makes it a little bit hard to like think through in terms of, imagine, all right, your Shopify is saying reporting in New Zealand dollars, your Facebook account is reporting USD or whatever, and then maybe you look at something else and it's reporting in pounds because maybe UK branding, and it's just this messy, like no one's just thought about how to do this, right? And so you go, okay, well, we're going to launch a new ad account, and we're going to put it in the native currency, which in this case might be AUD, and that we're rolling out to align with our Shopify reporting, which is going to report in AUD, and our P&L is going to be in AUD, and so we're just going to align all the currencies together so reporting is a bit more in line, and we're talking apples to apples when we're comparing markets. Right, and so that would be like the country segmentation part. Roll it out in a P&L, segment it to different the local currencies, and then so that's kind of this like progressive internationalization. And from there, maybe it starts to grow a bit more. Maybe you need to think about local creatives or local targeting or local translations if you're in Europe, especially. And you kind of maybe you get big enough where you have like brand A has its own GM, country manager, brand 2 has its own GM, and then you'd be like talking 9-figure plus. And so that's kind of like how I think about progressive internationalization.
I love that. There, like, I don't even need to add anything to it. That's just brilliant. But there's something that I would say that's like tangential to it that I really like, which is when you're talking new markets, one form of new market is internationalization. Another form of a new market, though, is even within the same country, just a completely different segment of people than you were previously reaching. And the brand that comes to mind for that, for me, and I mention them all the time, is the Stanley mugs, right? They went from like, middle-aged construction worker to teenage girl. It's like that was a wild market expansion without even having to go internationalization. And that's not always going to be true. Like the Udi, right? It's like, well, maybe that could work where you go to a completely different group where it's like maybe you're hitting, teenagers on TikTok, and then all of a sudden you go to grandparents, and it's like, well, that can be done too. But sometimes it's going to say, how do you determine between the internationalization new market or the new market within different demographic or something? And I'm sure there's ways we can get into it. But there was a third thing that you mentioned though too that I wanted to get into. So it was beyond the new channels, new markets, and I forgot what it was. What was the third one?
Products, new products. Yeah.
Product. Yeah.
So new channels, new markets, new products. Yeah.
And new products is potentially, I would say, then you have to weigh on what is your brand. New products to me seems like the most challenging one because I understand marketing. I'm not a product guy. But if you're a product team, then you might say, well, I don't know, figuring out a new channel seems a lot more difficult to us, but we can crank out a new product very easily. And so you just have to look at what your particular skill sets are.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the way the most brand, but I love the way that you talked about new markets in the context of targeting new customer segments as well. It's absolutely, and sometimes in the case of Stanley's case, like they used to be a their core market wasn't it like hunters or outdoor adventure, that was their core customer segment, and they like the guy from Crocs came in. And then they targeted middle class American women, and kind of probably like a product market, like the Venn diagram was like market product, and you kind of like Venn that in the middle. It's like same product, new kind of repositioning of same product. Yeah, very very clever. Wonderful case study that people should really understand how to reposition your product. But yeah, talking about new products. So the way most direct to consumer brands start is I like to give this example with like t-shirts, right? Because I think it's one of the most obvious examples. The path forward to new products for most direct to consumer brands is pretty obvious. For most, it's really pretty obvious. Let's take an example. You launch a a t-shirt, right? You launch like a white t-shirt, and it has this new fit, right? And there's a few brands that have done this that might come to mind. You launch a new t-shirt, it's like a really good fit, and that's like its innovation. And then you go, oh wow, people really like this t-shirt. Let's launch some new colors, because our customers, are asking for new colors, and we think that makes sense. So launch some new colors. And then you're like, oh wow, our customers really like these new t-shirts, new colors. What about we launch like a V-neck as well? And then so you add on like a very similar type of product. So you got like maybe a crew neck and you have a V-neck. And they're very similar products, right? Maybe add like a polo on top of that. But you still like the t-shirt kind of like category. And then you're like, whoa, you know what else our customers would like? They'd probably like some pants. I think our customers might like some pants, and that's not like an innovation, right? It's just like going, and then you go, what else might our customers who buy apparel from us like? They might like jumpers and shorts, and so the path forward to most brands within existing categories is pretty obvious in that regard, and that's kind of like how I think about it, and whatever reason you might transition to going from t-shirts to pants might just be seasonality. We don't, you're like summer and then all of a sudden winter, you're like, oh, our sales kind of don't do well in winter. No one's buying t-shirts anymore, or not as many people are buying t-shirts anymore. So what do we need to do? Well, we need a winter range. Well, what's a good winter range to start? Well, maybe that might be pants. Because for whatever reason, we might be better at starting with pants than jumpers or hoodies or whatever, for whatever reason. And so that's the case. And then it becomes, okay, well, that's how you kind of start your new product, right? You do like some kind of analysis. You might either be a product, and I usually find founders sit in a few distinct buckets and maybe one or two core buckets at a time. So if you're creating a fashion brand, maybe you are like you come from some kind of fashion background or knowledge, or maybe you're a designer. It's very common for like fashion brands, the founder be a designer or something that they've always been interested in. They might have worked for a design previously, or they've just done it as a hobby and they're like, I want to try and do this. Or maybe they're like some kind of they have a marketing background. They've kind of learnt what products people like, and solving that kind of problem that way. So, but because founders usually have some kind of core competency. And if their product background, they're probably more intuitive about launching a new product than they are maybe about launching into new markets, or even launching just higher up the advertising funnel. And so whatever like box they pick is usually what is they're most comfortable with. In my view. And that's not to say you can't do all three at the same time, right? You can. Sure. You can. So you should absolutely. Out of all of this, new products will probably benefit you the most, because you can launch new products in new markets and across new channels. And you just kind of complete that playbook all the time. And I think brands should get very comfortable with launching new products within their category to build out their like portfolio, to de-risk. You don't just want to have one single best hero product. You absolutely want to de-risk it and have some levers that you can pull due to seasonality or due to just general risk management of your business, right? For whatever reason.
Totally agree with you. So let's say that you did decide to go do all three. You've iced it out. You and I have talked before that we both really appreciate the ICE framework for evaluating things, and you've got a really great tweet about that that people can go check out. Let's say you've iced it out, and now you're trying to get your team all aligned on all of these initiatives across multiple international markets and multiple new products. How do you go about streamlining the marketing organization?
Yeah. So do you want to discuss ICE, or you want to talk about how to run the marketing? Or
I feel like ICE is fairly intuitive. I think they can go check out your tweet there. And I think the thing that I personally struggle more with understanding that I'd like your thoughts are like that expanding that marketing team. Getting them all on the same page.
Yeah, so I refer to this as, excuse me. I refer to this as professionalizing the marketing org, and so I'll set the context where it's, maybe you've internationalized into a few markets. You have a combination of some agencies or some freelancers and some in-house team. Maybe you're fully in-house or you have an in-house. Either way, you have some kind of team in place, and the founder is maybe overseeing the team, or maybe there is like a head of growth in place. So context, there is like some kind of team in place. And there has to be some kind of operating cadence for which the marketing team understands, like how to operate, like the weekly or monthly cadence, like what to work on, and how do you hold people accountable, and like how should a meeting be run, who should be in the meeting, and so I think there's a few frameworks that are pretty useful. I'll start with what is the L10 meetings or level 10 meetings by a guy called I think his name is Gino Wickman. I think his name is. I hope I didn't butcher that. And he's written a book on this called Traction. It's from like this EOS framework, which is Entrepreneurial Operating System. If people haven't read it, I recommend they do. It's broadly applicable to
we use
business.
It.
Yeah,
it's every business.
Yeah. It's absolutely. Very broadly applicable to every business, but there are some nuances that you should adjust within the context of whatever business you're in, whether B2B
it's true for
or
any framework.
Whether whether e-commerce. So I like to implement this like an e-commerce version of this L10 meeting, and it starts off as like so. And this is like a meeting cadence, right? So maybe at the start of the week on a Monday, all the team gets together, and who did decide is that meeting? It might be every department leader. So it might be like head of growth, like maybe head of retention, head of acquisition, ops, whoever's responsible for ops, whoever's responsible for merchandising, product, etc. So whoever is responsible for their business function within your brand. And so it kind of starts off as like everyone's there on time. And it starts off with good news, and it's 5 minutes of like, all right, let's talk about some good news for the week. What happened last week, and it might be personal, or it might be something that you want to celebrate in the business, whatever that is, just to get people, feeling good in the meeting. Or if you're in, if you're in Germany, you don't do any good news, you just start the meeting. That's something I learned about working in side tangents. It's one of the things I learned about working in Germany is like the meeting just starts. Yeah. There's no like, how's your mother? They used to joke about this with me. They're like, oh, there's no like, how's your mother? How's your brother? How's your dog? How's your sister? No. You just start the meeting. And so there's like some, cultural, there are some subtle cultural differences that you have to get used to working across markets. But yeah, so in this context, you forcefully start with good news, you 5 minutes worth of that. And then from there you have, what would be the department specific scorecards, that you're just talking about at a very high level of what's going on within the department. So with marketing, you might be reporting on how we go into forecast, or in terms of like net sales or contribution dollars, for example. Are we on track last week and for the quarter? Like maybe a more broader zoomed out, or maybe just week over week or month to date if you want to report on that. And then you have like maybe inventory position, so merchandising. What are our a higher level in stock or overstock SKUs and weeks worth of stock, whatever like merchandising might want to report on, bestsellers, overstocked or whatever. Maybe ops report on delivery times or like freight inbound, and then you have like customer success, which might report on tickets, time to ticket closed, or whatever that may be for a number of tickets, time to resolve. Whatever that may be, but just like a few core indicators to just know how the different departments are doing. And then from there, you kind of go into like quarterly goals, or as like traction. Gino refers to them as rocks, but I like quarterly goals.
Yep.
And so I think whatever you're reporting at the scorecard level should transition into the quarterly goals. So like that's why I said with the scorecards, if it's like just bring up like a bit of a zoomed out approach. That way you can see you kind of hit two birds with one stone. And so the idea through this is, talking through scorecards and goals is to not have a long discussion. It's to like, here's where we're at. Here's sales contribution. Here's where inventory position is. Go through different departments. Okay, next one. Quarterly goals. How are we? How are we on track for our quarterly contribution target, or EBITDA for the target? How are we on track for that? What's our inventory position? How is that? Whatever the OKRs are or quarterly goals, rocks for this for the different departments. Everyone touches on that. 5 minutes. Not really a discussion. Just like, here's where we are at. From a high level perspective, and then that's like kind of the quant part, and then you move into like the qualitative part, I'd argue, which is like, all right, let's go to any customer feedback, neutral, positive, negative. That would be customer success team, and then they're going to like, oh, our customers have been saying this, we're getting inquiries about this, our returns been pretty high, and they're talking a little bit about that, or just some good feedback. Like, we recently had a product launch, feedback has been super positive. And everyone has just been saying such good things about our new product launch. And now we can service this market, and we're getting some really good customer feedback with that, whatever that may be. So that'd be customer success. And then what I like to do is have whoever is responsible for the marketing calendar to talk through what is happening in the next, like this week and the next week, just to like align the team on like, here's what's going on. Here's what we're launching. Here's what sale we have on. Here's like the discount tier, if it's changed or it's a new one. Here is like, we have our creative team's going to be doing a photo shoot this week. Just like a high level view of what is going on from a marketing calendar perspective, to just align the team on like what is happening in marketing as well. And so that's just like, share your screen, bring up, here's the marketing calendar, here's the days that we're doing X, Y, Z, or next week, here's what's coming up. And then maybe ops like, oh, hang on, we're just waiting for the 3PL to get this back to us, and we need to hold off a few days on that. Okay, let's bring this forward a bit more, so it won't launch on Tuesday, it'll launch on Thursday now. And everyone kind of like, so that might be something that might happen. Note, action item for later. And then you have like, okay, so what are, you spend 5 minutes on that, and those things shouldn't be spent any more than 5 minutes on each of those that we discussed so far. And then you have what's called IDS, which is identify, discuss, solve. And from there, you talk through what are some challenges that are occurring in the business, and here is where the discussion really happens, right? Where you discuss, all right, so we've got this issue with whatever it may be with this 3PL provider. They haven't been, delivery times been terrible. They've been losing inventory, and they're really expensive as well. And we're considering moving. This is a big challenge for us at the moment, but it's in a different market, and so it's in Canada, for example. It might be in Australia. Mm-hmm. So how do we do that? What are the steps? And so okay, mate, and then you go like, what is the real issue? And then you get to the real identify. What is the real issue? Might be multifaceted in this case. You discuss, what are the associated things around that, and then you try and solve that as well. And maybe not everyone needs to do this. Maybe it's just a high level a few people have oversight of, and you go from there. And maybe this could be done in like an ops meeting as well. It doesn't have to be in a broader meeting. Maybe it's just a more ops specific discussion and goes to ops meeting. They run their own kind of they run their own L10 meeting to do that as well. And then you just go down the list, right? So that's where like the majority of time should be spent. You do that. And then at the end, maybe it's like, someone should be keeping time here and there's 5 minutes left in the meeting. Gino recommends an hour and a half this meeting, but I've generally found that most of the stuff can be done within an hour. And then you conclude the meeting, 5 minutes to go. Someone's like, hey, 5 minutes left. All right, conclude meeting. You recap your, one thing I forgot is even before the IDS, you should have a to-do list from the previous week. And so that can be like action. So action item was like, do this, and someone's taking notes, action item, action item, action item. And then you kind of filter that out into everyone who needs to be accountable for those items. That might be the department heads that are in the meeting, and they may transition that to individual contributors who they're responsible for. And then you do that. Next week you come back and someone's like, okay, hey, just following up, have you had this go? Did you finish this? And so like 90% of tasks should be done throughout the week. And if 90% aren't done, maybe there's an accountability issue, or maybe it's just a multi-week task. But yeah, so that should happen before the IDS. It should be last week's tasks. And then you go to IDS, identify, discuss, solve. 5 minutes remaining. Conclude. You review the new to-do list that has come. You talk about any cascading communication that needs to go to the company or to the rest of the team, whoever the leaders are responsible for. And then afterwards, you can give the meeting a rating from like 1 to 10 as well. And the idea is to not grade whoever is running the meeting, but to talk about how the flow of the meeting ran, the structure. Maybe it's like, well, we don't like we spend too much time on this, or we don't think this reporting needs to happen, or we think more reporting needs to happen. Another department needs to be brought in there that hasn't been. And so, like, or like we don't think everyone is contributing, or goes too long. Maybe it goes an hour and a half. You're like, we don't need it an hour and a half. We think we can do this in an hour. So that's just like the rate the meeting in some form. It can be like a Google sheet that people put their thing on, or like a Google form that you fill out, people rate it, or whatever the mechanism is, you have some rating. So I've also worked with some brands who just don't like to rate it either. Whatever. But that's kind of like part of that. Yeah, 10. Yep. And so that is like the L10 meeting in a nutshell.
And I love it. We run on it as well. We have our senior leadership L10. We have departmental L10s as well, and those are the ones that we only have as an hour long, whereas the full senior leadership one is the full 90 minutes. I would say I love the framework. My tips that I would give for maximizing it is you absolutely have to stick to that timeline that you discussed. It is critical because it's too easy to get sidetracked otherwise. The other thing would be, they talk about this is no politicking, right? Where it's like, you've said your point, say your point, and then like move on from there, like not continuing to rehash the same point over and over and over again. And then the I part of the IDS, I think to your point, I think in a pretend world, you think that like all of the I's that are going to come in there for the ideate are going to be right, but they're not. And I think to your point, you're like, you have to actually kind of like do a little digging to get to what's the real problem that we're trying to solve. And so I think, having done this a little bit longer now, I've realized that it's like, oh, it's ID. It's like identify, discuss it more. Okay, re-identify. Nope, discuss it a little bit. Okay, now we know the actual problem. Now we can actually go about solving it. Otherwise, you try to solve the wrong problem too quickly. And I think we got caught doing that a little bit early on when we implemented that.
And the challenging part as well is maybe getting to the root cause of what we think the problem is might not be favorable for some departments over other departments or some people, right? And so, you have to deal with that as well, where, and just be conscious of like not trying to blame, like, oh, well, this is you're responsible for this. No, totally. And so just trying to do that in a respectful way, but do it in a way that doesn't, I like to say, doesn't hide the shit under the rug, right? We're not trying to hide the shit under the rug. Let's bring it up. Let's understand what the root cause of this really is. And then let's try and solve that together, right? And people should be empowered that they have, the capability, or that they're being empowered to help try and solve this as well. That's where the magic comes from, is like the discussion and the solution once you really solve it as well.
So I can't believe how fast this time has gone. I like to transition into the who is Tyson Drake part of this show. Speaking of magic, you mentioned magic. What makes you magical?
I've got 2 really good magic card tricks. That's what makes me magical. No, I can't really show you because you're not here, and I don't have a deck of cards on me. But no, what I think what makes me, I guess, let's substitute magical with unique.
Okay,
is I've been doing ecom for like 15, 16 years now. And that's across venture-backed brands, that is across countries. I spent 3 years in Berlin working for a venture capital firm. I was doing direct to consumer in 2009 when it was just called e-commerce, right? And importing our own products from China and factories and challenges associated with that. You know, I've done fitness equipment, I've done pet and like, you know, kids, you know, products, and I've done MRO, which is like maintenance, repair, operations, which has like 100,000 SKUs. I've done single hero product SKUs. You know, I've done so many different categories across so many markets and so many levels of inventory that I've just built up, I guess, a wide range, like a broad repertoire, working like in these business and not just like one function of these businesses. And so I've been doing this for a long time. I have a broad range of, I guess, use cases to draw upon, and a lot of the frameworks that I've kind of come across or developed over my career has been a result of me trying to solve problems in like one business that I've, you know, later on just been like, oh, this is just applicable to this other business as well. But I wouldn't have like figured this out in this business to the extent that I've had to figure it out. So I'll give you an example. So I've got this merchandising scorecard that I use, which like is a really detailed view of how to understand what categories are like moving, you know, what categories are producing revenue and or what collections within those categories and what products within those collections within those categories. And I developed that when I had, you know, went into this business that had like 20,000 SKUs. And I was just like, what the fuck is going on in this business? Like, how do I, first of all, get some sense of transparency, like data, like what is just going on, right? So, okay, how do I structure data in a way that I can see how do we allocate budget across categories, across collections? You know, you can't just promote the single best hero product all the time because you've got 19,000 other products to promote as well. But do you, or do you just call out the best hero product in whatever category or collection? And then how do you structure your ad accounts to like account for that? You can't just run a consolidated ad account for that because Facebook's just going to find the best seller and run with that, but you've still got, you know, 19,000 other products to move. So how do you think about that? And across seasonality as well. So just like problems I've just encountered with some brands, I've just found out, well, they're actually applicable to other brands that even have hundreds of products, or like 1,000 products or 10 products are still applicable. And so, so what's magic about me is, I guess, the breadth and depth of which I've operated in a lot of these brands at scale. And then of course you just build up this bank of like ways to think about and solve problems, right? And I think that just comes with experience and time. And my core competencies, I believe, are in those three buckets, which is why I've segmented them as a fractional CMO. They're measurement and analytics, and I'm really good at data analysis and you know, measurement infrastructure, establishing that if they haven't got any, or coming into existing infrastructure, and building or building that out. Two, like the marketing, professionalizing the marketing org, so the L10 meetings, but also like RACI, you know, responsible, accountable, consultant, informed. Like how should you think about that? But also like hiring, right? And you know, I believe hiring shouldn't be left up to putting out a job ad and letting whoever is currently looking for a job be your best candidate. No, you should go out and find the best candidate through LinkedIn or whatever way you might want to ask your peers or your network to, if anyone knows any good XYZ. So it's just like these frameworks of like, okay, well, I've had to come in, and usually I've come in where I've been like the head of growth of a brand, and where they either are working only with agencies and they need to in-house or they want to in-house all their competencies. And then it's like, okay, well, learn how to hire, learn how to run this team, learn how to, you know, these. And over time, you just build up these playbooks, right? Yeah, you're like, oh, okay, well, I've read Traction like several years ago. You're like, okay, well, that's applicable for e-commerce. And we could adjust it a little bit, but it's applicable. And then you're like, okay, and then you just build up your competencies over time. It just takes time, right? And so that's like the marketing org, and then like the growth strategy, right? It's like, well, you know, internationalization, new markets, new products, new channels, but also like three ways to grow a brand, right? acquire more net new customers, reacquire existing customers, or reactivate, and then grow AOV and then like gross margin. And so every growth tactic essentially fits into those three buckets, I would argue, and sometimes multiple. And even the new channels, new markets, new products is kind of like an acquisition method. So you stick that into like the bucket of the acquisition. So yeah, you just build up this playbook over time, I guess.
I love it. Well, speaking of magic playbooks, I also have 2 very good magic card tricks. So the next time we meet up in person, we'll have to have a magic card trick competition between the 2 of us.
Wonderful. Love it.
What makes you cringe? What's something that you're like, ugh?
Yeah, so I like to joke that Twitter is very especially DTC Twitter is very US centric, and by that I mean the majority of people who are just on there are on US. I think I can probably name all the Australians that are on DTC Twitter. There's probably maybe 10 of them, or maybe 5 that are, or 10 that are just a bit more vocal. And there's a lot of lurkers. Like I was a lurker for a long time, and wasn't a contributor. Now I'm contributing a lot more. But I always like to like joke around and say like look in Twitter and like, oh, what are the Americans arguing about today? What are they arguing about? It's always cost caps, or like what marketing tactic are the Americans arguing about today? And it's not because Americans are argumentative or whatever. It's just that strong opinions loosely held, right? You want to have a candid discussion, a robust discussion, and sometimes that involves that should involve multiple views with multiple opinions, and so that's how you kind of get to the truth, right? And that's great, but it's just US dominated. So to me, it's always what are the Americans arguing about today?
I like that. That's fair. Last question. I really like talking to people about obviously you're up arrowing your business. What about the rest of your life? Are there certain things that you're trying to up arrow in your personal life, relationships, health, or things like that? And how?
Yeah. I have 2 kids, right? I have a 3.5-year-old and a 6.5-year-old. 3.5-year-old girl, 6.5-year-old boy. And so one thing that I have really enjoyed about being a fractional CMO is, I'm not working like 60, 70, 80 hours a week anymore. I mean, I can if I want to. I'll just take on more work. But I only work with maximum 3 clients at a time, and every client that I work with will get a dedicated day. And so, usually how it works out is very rarely I'll do 1 day a week, but sometimes I might. And usually clients get either 2 or 3 days a week. So if you go, one client gets 1 day a week, one client gets 2 days a week, and one client gets 2 days a week, it's kind of 3 clients.
Sure.
But majority of the time I'm working with 1 to 2 clients. And so what it does is, or what it has done is it's freed me up to take my son to like football, for example, Australian football, which is like, from 3:30 to like 4:30. So like usually I'd pick him up from school at 3 p.m. and we live 5 minutes walk to school and back. So usually I'd be like, walk to school, 5 minutes, pick him up, walk home, 10 minutes, done. And then I'd just get back into my work again. And that varies. I usually take him to school in the morning. And so now I can take them to school in the morning, right? I can take my son to school in the morning at 8:30, and I'm not like stuck in traffic for an hour, from like 8:30 to 9, and then like I work by 9 or 9:30 or whatever. So it's just given me a bit more freedom, and part of that is because the majority of my clients are in the Northern Hem. So either I dedicate mornings to like align with them from like their evening or their late afternoon, and or they're in or it'd be my night, or European mornings would be my afternoon. And so I have like so that's usually my work hours, and maybe like part of my work hours is actually like managing team, being on calls, running meetings or stuff like that. But a lot of my work hours is me like either doing some analysis or building a report, or doing things where I don't need to be in the same room with people, and I can get work done. And so having choosing to either take on more clients or not, I now have the freedom to be present a lot more with my children, and that's something that I really, really value. And that doesn't mean they come home from school and I'm straight away like spending 2 hours with them. It means that I have the ability to pick them up, take them to school, take them to football practice for like an hour, during the day if I want to, and then come back home again, and then work like in the evening if I want to. So I'm not like I don't have the boundaries of this, like you have to be in the office from like 9 to 5 or whatever that may be. When you have more responsibility, it's usually like be in the office from like 9 to 6 and then go home and then work on the stuff that you didn't get done during the day because you're in meetings all day. And that's just something that I've found is I've just been able to get back a lot of my time, and so for me it's been the prioritizing family over work, and making conscious decisions that is what I'm doing as well, rather than having to not being at home and not being able to pick up my kid from school, for example.
Yeah, I think, like you said, the conscious decision to do that, being intentional about it. And something that I've learned, I've got 3 kids as well, and something I've learned from raising my kids is I thought that it needed to be this really unique, dedicated time that I spent with them, like almost like this fake time, right? And more often than not, it is that half-hour drive to a sports practice or whatever that is, just genuinely good one-on-one conversation, getting to know them. And it's like, I think as a parent, just reminding yourself that it's like, hey, there are a lot of opportunities. They might not necessarily look the way you thought they were going to look, but it's like if they're there, if you're willing to grab a hold of them and use them.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is just in some capacity, whatever that capacity is, and that's different for every individual based upon their commitments and whatever, but just being present with them in some capacity. And for me, it's just being more present as a parent. That's on the weekends, that's on, when I'm with them at any time, just being more consciously present. And, so that's the main area that I have trying to, I guess, level up my life in.
Tyson, it has been absolutely amazing talking to you today. We are at the end of our time. If people wanted to work with you, follow you, what's the best way for them to get in touch, stay in touch with you?
Yeah, so if you're on Twitter, follow me, Tyson Drake. If you want to reach out, I have a website, tysondrake.com, and my LinkedIn is also Tyson Drake.
Making it easy on us.
Any of those ways, you'll find me.
That's perfect. I really appreciate you taking your time to share so much wisdom with us today. It's been very, very insightful, and I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, Will. Really appreciate you having me on the podcast.
All right. Have a great day. And everybody else, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Up Arrow podcast with William Harris. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.